Okay, so this is the second clip in this series I'm calling Geopolitics and the Balance of Payments. As I just finished up in my last clip, clip number 1, the three main things that Engdahl talks about in his book in chapter 7 is, first, this Bretton Woods sort of global scheme that was created for post-World War II economic and financial control and regulation of the world economy. So that was the first one. The second one was a very interesting story about Iran and their premier, and how he got himself into some interesting fights, let's put it that way. Effectively what happened was what's called a coup d'etat, a little French phrase that basically means, nice way of saying, we're going to overthrow your government, and he basically got deposed. And so that the powers that be in Washington and London could put back in the Shah of Iran, and because they were fighting over who controls the oil interests in the country. And the third one, which I think is even more interesting than the Iranian one, is this guy named Mattei. It's spelled M-A-T-T-E-I, Mattei, that's how I'm going to pronounce it, in Italy. And what he was doing in basically post-World War II, sort of, how can I put this, well, the Italian country was pretty much destroyed because they just gone through the Second World War, so it was kind of like a industrialization, redevelopment of the country. Put it back together. Unfortunately, well, for him, because he ended up dying, and there are certain allegations, suspicions that it was actually an assassination, mainly because, you know, he was sort of talking to JFK, who also got assassinated like a year later. It seems like all these guys got assassinated, or removed, or deposed, or something nefarious and sinister, perfidious happened to them. But anyway, he also was very concerned about balance of payments issues, and because that was one of the big problems that Italy had as well. So it kind of brings in big oil, oligopoly, control, hegemony with balance of payments issues. So it kind of becomes a very interesting story. So let me begin with this. I have 13 pages of notes here. Oh man. But unfortunately I can't cover all of it. It's got a lot of interesting stuff. He talks about with that, but you don't need to know that. Let's start here with the Bretton Woods stuff. Now his thesis basically is that hegemony, this power control over world petroleum, over oil, gas, and this type of stuff, was sort of a central issue, a central thing that influenced the thinking of Lord Keynes. That's that, you know, John Maynard Keynes, who's that famous economist that has, you know, influenced macroeconomics, and this other guy, Harry Dexter White, who was at the United States Treasury Department, I believe. Anyway, the key takeaway point is that you had the Second World War, and of course, you know, this is 1944, so the war is still going on, but it's pretty much, you know, everyone sort of sees that the Axis powers, so like, you know, the Germans and the Japanese, are pretty much going to lose, or that's at least the direction it's going. And so they're planning these people in these sort of meetings in New Hampshire, Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. this sort of, how are we going to sort of put the world back together in the post-war era? How is all these economies going to work? What's the grand scheme of all of this? And that's what this Bretton Woods system was sort of the answer to. And in it, what he talked about is what were sort of the main key points of this. So here we have the situation. We have these people, very important people sitting around, and in particular when you have the United States involved in this, because remember, Britain and France and Italy and Germany and Japan, they're all pretty much destroyed at this point. So the only real big economic country is the United States. They're sort of, no one can really challenge them because there's no one left to do that. And of course, he also discusses, how a lot of the big banks and stuff were also kind of influencing and big oil companies were also sort of influencing how this all worked out. But what they ended up producing was what are called the 3 pillars. So this is what these guys said, this is how we're going to do this, to sort of run the whole world economy. They call it, as I said, the 3 pillars. And what are these? One is called the World Bank. That's one of the pillars. The second is called the IMF, or International Monetary Fund. And the third one is called the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. Okay, so as you can see, so these are the 3 key things here. Notice what we have here. General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. The idea here is we want to remove tariffs, we want to remove quotas, and we want to move towards a world of free markets. Okay, part of the reason was because, again, they learned through the Great Depression that when one country imposes tariffs to try to create jobs for their domestic producers, other countries say, I don't like the fact I just lost all these jobs, so they retaliate and they put tariffs on something to fight back from the first country. And so that all these are, I put tariffs on you, you put tariffs on me, basically grinds world trade to a halt. So this basically is sort of one of the reasons why it's important to know that little chart I showed you about tariffs, quotas, and free trade. The second thing was the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. Now, the International Monetary Fund sort of played 2 roles. One pertained to those fixed exchange rates that I talked about. This whole scheme also, and I'll talk about this more in clip 3, involves sort of it's not exactly a true fixed exchange rate system. They called it a peg system, because basically what that means is the countries would fix their exchange rates, so it's sort of like a fixed exchange rate, but from time to time they could adjust them. Okay, and they even gave them special terms. So what you normally call depreciation of a currency, you have to pay more to buy 1 unit of foreign currency, under this scheme is called a devaluation of the currency. And what you would normally think of as an appreciation, when you have to pay fewer Canadian dollars to buy 1 unit of foreign currency, would be called a revaluation. So that's the one thing that the IMF did. So it was basically, my chair keeps making really stupid noises. Anyway, so again, IMF was involved with this pegging, which is basically like a fixed exchange rate. And the second thing was that it was involved with what they call balance of payment crises. And I'll explain what a balance of payment crisis is. And it's not that hard because you already know all the components of it because I've already taught them to you. I just have to sort of put the pieces together. So clip 3, I'll come back, balance of payment crises.